publisher and editor of ModernAnalyst.com, the premier online community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled How to Get Started Documenting Processes with Business as an Equal Partner. I'd like to say thank you to Lombardi Software for sponsoring this event. Today's speaker is Steve Berger. Steve runs the Tillamook County Creamery Association's Business Process Management Office, and he was previously the company's IT director. Steve will present for about 20 minutes, after which he will take your questions, so make sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the webinar software. So welcome again, and this time I will turn it over to Steve to get started.
Okay, in this presentation on how to get started documenting processes with business as an equal partner, we're going to go through a case study and some initiative here at Tillamook County Creamery Association on how we came into the discovery mode that we needed to do this initiative, where we got started, and how we implemented and what the results were. So next slide. Talk about a little bit about Tillamook and what we do here at our company, some of the challenges we faced as we got a new president, and he recognized some challenges and opportunities. A good concept about tribal knowledge, I think, is interesting because we really encountered that concept of tribal knowledge, and how in that discovery we understood that business process management really closed the gaps on a lot of issues and functions and business processes that we had. It helped us to answer the question, why manage the processes, what tools and techniques we used. And then after all this, we kind of have a new view of what BPM really is. And then finally, open up for questions. Okay? A little bit about us, Tillamook County Creamery. We're a food and beverage manufacturer. We're rural. Tillamook is a rural county over on the northwest coast of Oregon. We're owned by 150 dairies. We're a co-op. We focus primarily on quality dairy products throughout the western United States and some in the Midwest. And again, with the focus and the drive and initiative of our whole strategic plan is to maintain consistency and quality. We've won several national awards for our products, and we're pretty proud of what we put out on the market. We have 2 plants in Oregon, one here in Tillamook on the coast, and one in Central Oregon in Boardman up on the Columbia River right across from Washington. Company of over 600 employees at both plants. We've been in business for about 100 years. Next January will be our 100th year anniversary. If you look on our logo in the introduction, you'll see a sailboat, and that sailboat was how we got our product up and down the Oregon coast back in the late 1800s. So pretty dated company. I'm Steve Berger. I was IT director since 2001. I'm a project management professional, and right now my assignment is to open and run a process management office and develop a model for our company to move forward with our business process management. Okay? Some of the challenges we faced as we had our new president come in, we have several cross-functional business units, as you'll see as we go along in this presentation. Cross-functional meaning quality, human resources, IT, marketing, operations. And we're going to discover that they were operating in somewhat of a silo business model. And so we needed something to, to break down this cross-functional business method. We discovered we had a lack of proper IT systems and infrastructure, legacy systems, over about 30 systems that we had at the time when we first began, trying to talk to each other through customized interfaces and business processes that were never very clearly defined. Most of the business intelligence that happened in our company was paper-based, either through spreadsheets or Word documents or napkins or any method of getting information back and forth between these cross-functional business units. And we really didn't understand at the time what the objectives were in our intelligence to begin with. So we needed to, figure out what our business processes were, document them, and then come up with a model that would work. One of the biggest challenges we had was this concept of tribal knowledge. And if you can imagine looking across the horizon of two mountains and seeing smoke clouds going back and forth, that's kind of how we got that. And that really was kind of typical of our operating procedures from business unit to business unit. We didn't understand what the processes were they were trying to get across to each other, and the knowledge of this of their processes and their business units was really handed down over the generations. Most of our employees have been here over 20 years, and so although they knew their business processes very well, their neighboring business unit might not have understood why or when they did things like they did. And so that was one of the primary challenges of our understanding what our processes and how to manage our processes, was breaking down this tribal knowledge and getting it standardized. Okay. When we first began this initiative of documenting our business processes, the traditional view of our organization was that we had a corporate team made up of a group of vice presidents and our existing CEO that kind of oversaw these different silos of operation. You can see, the variety that we have here. And although each of them were functioning well within their own business unit, we found a lot of space between them. I'm calling it gray space. You may refer to it as white space, but lots of duplication, inefficient interfaces, older IT platforms, and sharing information from within each business unit via manual sources and whatever ways they could, sometimes just meetings. Redundancy, duplication, inaccurate data. And so, it didn't take long for us to understand that we needed to, first of all, define and document what each of these silos were doing, but figure out a way to incorporate a workflow that would let them work as one more horizontal organization. Okay? So our goal was to improve the view, the business process view of our organization by identifying these processes, documenting them, and eventually, after we got to that point, we would optimize and share from within these silos. But you notice the difference in what our goal was. We needed to, and we did, have executive sponsorship to drive this initiative to break down these silos and break down this tribal knowledge and put it in a better format so we could all understand it. Okay. So we had to ask ourselves to begin with why we manage processes. And the executive team, along with some others that we'll talk about later, came to, about 4 primary reasons why we need to implement and document our business processes. For one, we understood it to be, the root of our competitive advantage. If we don't, you exist in business sometimes and you don't know what you don't know. And so we needed to, in our competition with other suppliers, needed to understand what we weren't knowing and what we weren't understanding about our business units and our business function. We have a lot of customers. Our customers happen to be like Walmart and Costco and Safeway and Winco and some of the larger sales organizations and consumer product organizations. And so we wanted to know what they needed. And so if we don't know what we need and what we're doing, we didn't see any way we could compete in the future and continue to grow with our customers. The CEO made it real clear that in this third bullet that we're looking at, performance of the individual is only as good as the process allows. So what that really did, and that was a really, really brilliant way for him to drive this process management. What that did is it created a desire for change within our company, because nobody, companies sometimes are pretty resistant and apprehensive about change. So his goal was to put this in the individual's hands and let them understand, the staffers, the managers, the workforce on the floor, that they can't be expected to perform to any level of competency or performance if we don't understand, and we can't understand what the process allows and what it's expected to do. And then again, finally, the managers had to learn how to manage the white space between those silos and areas that between the departments. Okay. So what we're looking at is, how do you get started in this? It seems daunting to begin with. What we did, we needed to get started with our high-level process map. And if you look at the very top row in this slide, those are what we took the business apart into 7 different milestones, or strategic or functional business pieces. And we gave them numbers because that means something later on as we talk. And we began with the very beginning. We didn't know, we didn't even really know how to get started. So one of our business unit managers said, we buy things, we make things, and we sell things. And so that was a pretty simple approach. And so we went and we talked as a team, and we started from the very beginning, and we went to the very end, and we said, what major points are there in between these 7 steps that help us operate as a business? And it became apparent, obviously, that at some point you have to define what your business strategy is. You need customers to be in business. You have to forecast and plan. I'm going across the top in milestones. And then we get to the manufacturing products. And how do we stock? What's our distribution and logistics? How do we get paid for what we do? And then what does it take to support all those milestones and those business functions? And when we first started out, we only had that top row. We only had it 1 through 7. And then as we went along in this project, we said, okay, let's start with number 1. How do we define strategy? How do we manage customer relationships? And then we broke those apart a little at a time. And each of those blocks in Lombardi represent the detail and the activity and all of the inputs and outputs and documentation that are embraced within each of those major business functions. So it was pretty easy for us to begin this way. Start from the beginning, go to the end, and figure out the basic things, the important key processes that you do in between the beginning and the end, and put them in and start documenting them. Then as we went along, you can see that we broke each of those down and eventually ended up with a nice document. Of course, there's dozens and dozens of processes and milestones that support this high-level process map, but that was the easiest way for us to get started. Okay? We needed a methodology to do this process improvement. And of course, as we talked, the first step was our executive leadership, our CEO, our new CEO. When he came on board, he recognized this tribal knowledge. It's funny, when you work in a business half your life, it doesn't pop out at you as something that could be a challenge or a problem. So he, coming from another company, another manufacturing company, who had gone through this exercise once before, recognized that we needed to have top-level support, and he offered that. We needed to, identify and build a team. And so we built a team from a cross-functional group of managers, about 9 of us. We called it Team Connect because we wanted to really promote this from within the company. And we had about 9 members, like I mentioned, QA, HR. We had 2 from IT. We didn't want it to be an IT initiative because typically what's happened in the past here is everything is owned by IT. And we didn't want that anymore. We wanted to have everybody own their particular processes and be, to show some ownership and responsibility and accountability for what was going on from within their department. And so we built this team called Team Connect, 9 of us, 2 from IT and 7 from all over the other company, typically directors and high-level managers. And we started to have interviews with all of the different business units and questions we would ask, and we would get into our process management tools, primarily Lombardi. We used Visio to start with and then switched over and found it to be much easier to use. And started going down the list. What do you do? Let's start documenting and talking about, and we would have other business units that they touched that they never even really understood why what they might have done caused a ripple effect all the way down the other end of the business function line. And so it was really enlightening to have these folks all in one room. Sometimes there would be as many as 25 of us from 7 different business units talking about one particular flow of business processes, and get it down in our process management tool and document it. That was really just the first step. We called that a brown paper because we were working towards a white paper, or it could have been an as-built or as-is, or call it what you want. But that was how this company existed at the time we did it. And then the next method, the next step that we used, we needed to analyze and design that and figure out where the white space really was and what were the challenges and opportunities by looking at inputs and outputs and the problems. We categorized the problems, gave them numbers so that we could sort them out and do some analysis on it. We built our, Lombardi high-level overview, as you have seen, and then we continued to document. And so after about 6 months of over 125 interviews, we had a findings report that took the export from Lombardi, and we sorted on it and did some filtering, and we prioritized our findings. And what we call low-hanging fruit, we figured out a strategy to make improvements on those. Now, about this time of the implementation was when the CEO said, okay, what we're going to do now is open up a process management office that's going to deal with all of these improvement findings. And so that's where I came into the picture. I was promoted to building that office and putting in a methodology and a framework for how are we going to deal with all this information that we've just spent 6 months gathering. And so anyway, this office went down to prioritize the improvements and came up with a framework and methodology to help the business owners and the process owners review this information and make suggestions. We didn't want the process management office isn't the cops of the process, is more the facilitator of getting things done and using the tools that we've given. Another part of that PMO was to assign process owners and sponsors so that we could have a single go-to of the variety of different business units that would be responsible for their processes. They would have access to the documentation. They would have access to all of the findings that we had, and also the use of the PMO to facilitate any meetings that they might have questions about, and to bring in the right people. That was one of the biggest advantages that we feel like we achieved in this whole initiative, was to understand the fact that you have to have all the right people in the right room to make the right decision. And so that was the PMO's responsibility to, look through the past documentation, who was involved in these processes, bring them all in and break down that tribal knowledge concept. And then we developed training in the use of the variety of tools, how to get in and look at your processes, how to look at what the documentation is, how to exercise different initiatives, and how to run a project. Next slide. So again, we couldn't have accomplished this without the use of a process map. As you get closer into looking at the tools that we used, it displays all of the variety of workflow and steps, inputs, outputs, sequence, accountabilities. We talked about, I call it gray space. The slide says white space. It's the same thing. It's the gap between processes that some people I should say some people, most of us don't understand how to manage. We can manage the processes, but it's difficult to, when you hand off a process that has a link or it affects some other business unit, it's difficult to manage because it's hard to find ownership for it. So we identified that and put ownership on that white space. And our process map and the tools we used did a good job of that because we knew who was on one process and who had handed off to the other, and we could get those folks all into one room and come to a conclusion. It helps us to understand where our product and where our information flows. We're in the process right now of implementing an ERP system, but we needed to understand who needed what information at what time and where is the source of it, and who's really responsible for each step. Another valuable part of the tools we use, that we could annotate the process data. We could change inputs and outputs. We could reprioritize errors and documentation and have a central repository of all of our cycle time, labor cost, product cost. And so it made it really easy using the tools that we selected to go through this initiative, which at the first we thought was going to be just daunting. Okay? So really, after we got through a good part of this, we came to a new understanding of what process management really was. We didn't have a real clear idea of how it would impact our company to begin with. But at this point, we've redefined the value of it. And so we have excited employees now that are looking forward to process change, where before they were apprehensive and a little bit reluctant to go down the route of our process management initiative. But our strategic direction for process management is we're looking for continuous improvement, business system continuous improvement. And so we could have never accomplished that without looking at all of our processes, our key processes, and figuring out who owns them, how we can improve them, how we can replace them, and what we need to do to adjust our challenges as we go along and move forward and compete in this business environment. It also, our new understanding, business strategies include goals for core processes. So up until this point, we didn't have any way of measuring performance as the processes went through their natural evolution. And with this initiative and with documenting our processes, we were able to put KPIs and metrics along the whole route and the whole workflow to see and measure how effective we really are as we move forward in improving our business process model. And so our new understanding is that we really have to measure the effectiveness through some metric of the processes that we're about to change, and this initiative really helped us do that. It also allows the organization to identify performance variations. So two processes set side by side might have the same goal or might have the same outcome, but we wanted to do some exercises and be able to see what if we changed this along the route, or what if we made an adjustment in this particular business unit or business process, how would that affect us? And by doing that, we could go back and we could look and we could identify, some root cause of why we were having some issues or some challenges in the beginning. So our new understanding is that, we want continuous improvement, we want goals for our core processes, and we want to be able to go back to the beginning of where processes and business units start so we can see what root causes might be affecting our business. Okay. So we're at the questions part.
Thank you, Steve. We have actually a number of questions. So let's see. Let's start with the beginning. There's a question right up front that says, what is a process?
What is a process? It's a group of inputs, activities, outputs that have some effect on the way that you do business. It could be, we've grouped ours into a couple of different types. We have organizational processes, we have system processes, and then we just have plain business processes. And so any activity that is fed by inputs, has tools and techniques within it, and has an output is what we're looking at as a process. I hope that
Great.
answered your question.
Great. Another question that we have is a couple questions around the white space. What exactly is the white and gray space that you were referring to?
Well, they're both the same. I use the term gray space. I apologize. It probably is more industry standard with the term white space, but it's possible for two processes to exist side by side that have an effect on each other, and the output of one can be the input of another, but it's difficult to manage that. It's hard to put your thumb on who exactly is responsible for that, and that can be a risk for some businesses. That the handoff and the understanding and the continuous flow of those business processes is, pretty fundamental to making business work right. And so that's what we're calling the white space, is that handoff between two distinct processes where you need to identify what the ownership is.
Great. And then, Steve, we also have a couple questions around, they're related to why did you choose Lombardi software over other BPM tools such as Visio, Savion, and others?
Well, it's not that we didn't look at those, and we've used some of those that you've mentioned. It was just our selection as a team, and I can't take credit for that. I mean, the team worked together as a functional unit, and we made decisions in consensus that once we got the tool up, we did a demo, we talked to Lombardi, and what we wanted was something simple, something visual, but it still had the impact of finding inputs, outputs, identifying documentation, and prioritizing errors. And at the time, it just worked really well for us.
Okay. And then obviously there's a couple of questions around the tools that you implemented. So did you implement just Lombardi software, or did you also implement workflow, other workflow tools, and also how did you train and who did you train in these tools in your organization?
Well, answering your first question, we just use Lombardi and pretty much Microsoft type tools. Excel was one of the what we're calling the master worksheet that has all of our results and recommendations in it. But Lombardi was really what fed that, and the discussion in our meetings was what fed that. And so it seemed to work really good for us. The Excel part gives us the ability to do some more analysis on the output of it, and we chose it because it was just real simple to use and worked really good for us. I didn't answer your second question. Can you ask that again?
The second question was related to training. Who did you train,
Oh,
and how
okay.
did you train in these tools in the organization?
Well, right now we're in the process of we've had a series of 3 workshop sessions with all of the process sponsors and owners and some related managers. And session number 3 is the detailed part of the training for all of our sponsors and owners on how to get into Lombardi, how to get into the worksheet, and view your processes. One of the things that I really like about the new version of Lombardi is it gives you the ability to print out a PDF of the discovery map. And so you don't really have to train in real detail on the use of Lombardi if a particular process sponsor just wants to look at what the discovery map is and see what the workflow looks like. And so we're in the process right now of doing that training and bringing everybody up to speed on what's available for them to review and how to look at their processes.
Okay, we're probably going to take a few more minutes for questions. I know we're at the end over scheduled time, but here are a couple more questions. One of them, there are two related. That is, who owns the processes, and these process owners, do they have the authority to change the processes?
Answering your first question, who owns them, we developed a list of process owners as we cataloged all of our processes. We gave them numbers like was mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. And we assigned a process sponsor for that particular group of processes. and then a process owner. And that process owner is actually the one that owns that process. And so they can come in, they can change, but they have to do it through a business model that we've developed. They do a process initiation request, and then we bring the right people in that are related to all of the surrounding implications of that possible change. We sit in a room, we figure out a project plan if necessary, a test, we execute it, we follow up and close it out. And so we have a business model set up for how those process owners go about making changes to their particular owned processes.
Thank you, Steve. We also have a number of questions related to documenting the processes and the details. That is, what tools do you use to document the detailed processes, if anything else? And we're going to cover now. But also, is there a challenge to keep those documentation current, and can you justify the business cost or the business value for doing so?
Well, again, the tools that we're using, Lombardi pretty much gives you everything you need in terms of the details of the process. That's the Lombardi blueprint. It gives you the ability to assign participants, experts, owners, inputs, outputs. All the documentation resides within each of the process milestones and activities. And so we found that to be enough for us to get through and understand and identify where, and it also gives us the ability to categorize the severity of errors and problems as we discover them. So that really was the tool that we used. Is there a challenge? Yes. That's pretty much the functionality of the process management office, is to keep this office is pretty much involved in all of the process change requests, logging them, finding out status, how they're doing, and then following back up and documenting them and making sure that that is a controlled document that folks, owners, sponsors can't just get in and change without some method of tracking the versioning and being sure that it went through the right model of initiate, plan, execute, and close out with the proper people there.
Another question for you was, how long did it take you to implement this new process initiative at Tillamook?
Well, we started January 1st, around the 1st of January. It was the 8th, actually, and we completed our deliverable like this first week in July. So it was a six-month process just getting through Team Connect, and now the process management office is going to be ongoing, but obviously we're going to have processes that need to be changed as this business grows and develops. And so the initial discovery part with Team Connect took about 6 months. And it took we spent about 3 days a week for that 6-month period meeting and coming up with our deliverable, and also documenting all the information and people and folks and trying to meet and understand what the outcome should look like.
Okay, let's try a couple more questions. The one was, what was the one key factor which enabled business as an equal partner when documenting processes?
I would say the key factor is getting everybody to the understanding that what each business unit does has an effect on their neighboring business units. I think that was, once we got that understanding amongst all of us, and it was enlightening. I mean, we had several meetings where people, the light bulb went off, and they understood that we had to all be in consensus and understand that what one business unit does affects the others, and it goes all the way down the line in some cases. It can go from the beginning to the very end, and so that was probably the key factor in making this whole initiative work, was getting that paradigm changed that helped people understand that what they do affects others, and there has to be a mechanism for communicating that change in ownership.
Very well. Let's try one more question. We're out of time. We have a ton of questions. What we're going to try to do, see if I can forward these to Steve, and then provide you guys with the answers if possible. So let's see if we can get another question. We had a couple questions related to process owners. How did you decide who the process owner should be? Like what criteria, what process did you use for that? And how do you differentiate between process owner and process sponsor?
We came to the determination of the process owners by looking at the experience with that particular management level. Have they been involved in that business unit long enough to really understand? Were they given the responsibility to make business decisions on a day-to-day basis that help them really understand what their processes were and what the responsibility would be? We did some training and identifying what a process owner and a sponsor really, the difference between the two, and so we're helping our process owners understand what their responsibility is. But primarily, it was their business and how much involvement they had in their particular department as a manager or director. The other question, what's the difference? The sponsorship really was the executive level group of oversight that gave support, advocacy, and had the ability and the position to be able to make business decisions in terms of resources, time schedules, and other executive type decisions at the sponsorship level. And whereas the owners, if we couldn't come to a consensus from the ownership level, we would move it to the sponsors and they would help make a decision. So that was primarily the difference.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for taking the time to do this webinar. Also, thank you for all who attended the webinar. We appreciate you taking the time. Hope you've learned something. We'll try to archive this webinar for if you want to review some of the slides, and I'll work with Steve to see if we can get the presentation for you to download. So thank you again for attending the webinar, and have a great day.
Thanks, Adrian.
You're very welcome. Thank you.